Hi, your watercolor artist Eva Nichols here. Today I'm going to show you how I do a guide for my watercolor palette so I know what I have in my palette. It's a useful tool and you learn a lot about the colors you have in your palette in the process of making this guide. So let's have some fun with that. So let's do this guide for our Jane E. Jones travel palette. The palette is 8 by 11 inches and I have some scrap watercolor papers that I never throw anything out as far as paper goes because it's expensive. So my piece of paper here is about 6 1/4 by 9 inches. It can be a little narrower, it can be a little wider, it can be a little shorter, whatever works for you. And what we're going to do is we are going to create a new guide. This one here, as you can see, got a little messed up. It got water on it and then some of the colors started bleeding, and so it's time for a little tune-up. And so I thought that was a perfect opportunity to show you how I do this. And so the first thing I do is I go about maybe about 1.5 inches, nothing, it doesn't have to be precise, in, and then I make a really fat black line with a permanent marker, and like I just used like a Sharpie like this, one of the fat ones, if you have one of those. And then I go back and forth a couple of times so I get a really nice solid black line. And the reason I like to put that on is I'm going to paint over it with the colors that I have in my palette, and then I can test and see how transparent or opaque the colors are, because they'll leave a little film if they're more opaque on the black that I can see. So that's just information that I want to have when I'm debating what colors to put in my palette. And then what I do, I can just tell you what I do is I just then grab my ruler, and then I have 12 colors in my palette, and I kind of try and mark out where I want my colors to go. So give myself a little room, and then so maybe I use about 1/2 inch and then 1/4 inch in between, or maybe, yeah, I could do 1/4 inch in between. Whatever works out for your for the length of your paper, so that you can get 12 stripes where you can put color in. Like here I've already marked it out and started on another guide. And so here I put some masking fluid in between, and you can also use tape. You can just tape it, whatever works for you, with some masking tape. But I tried with the masking fluid this time around, just because that way I can just paint all the colors right away. If I use masking tape, I'm taping over the next area, and so I'll have to wait for things to dry and stuff. So since I'm not big on waiting, I just this time decided I was going to do it with masking fluid. And what I used here was, I have these masking pens, the Molotov masking pen, and it has like a felt tip, kind of like a marker. I have this one, the fatter one, and I also have the little bit skinnier one. And I just took my ruler and then made the little spaces in between by running a couple of stripes of the masking fluid over, and then I let it dry. I did this last night so that I don't have to deal with wet masking fluid. And then I have my colors in my palette that I'm going to use. So I always start with the red and then I work my way down. And the way I do it, and I already did some here on this one here, I started with the Quinacrodone red, the next one is permanent red, then I have my opera rose, and then I have my permanent magenta. And if you only have, say, the 3 primary colors, you're just starting out, I would put the red here and then I would skip maybe 3 spaces and then put my blue, my French Ultramarine blue, which is the next one I'm going to put on this one, and then I'll skip maybe another 3 spaces and then put my yellow, because then as I add on more colors I can plop them in the right spot, and then you can just, you know, continue doing your guide. But you know, you can do whatever you like to do, but that's what I do. And I'm going to have it this way around, and I'm going to start with my first color, and I'm going to take my, just going to have it here so you can see it. I'll have there. Going to spray all my colors. That's how I always start. Spray my colors so that they're ready to play. And I'll just show you a couple of them. You don't have to watch me paint every single color. That's going to be like excruciatingly boring for you, I'm afraid. So I get my brush wet, dab it on my water control station, and then I'm going to start with the red. And so I go in here, mush it around out here a little bit. And actually what I like to do, and I should do that so you can see, let's find another brush. Maybe this one here, this is my number 8, that'll work out fine. It's actually a good idea to put a little bit of water on that outer part of where you're going to put the color down. So you can see that. I put a little bit of water on the last maybe 1/5 of the paper, because my whole idea with my guide is I want as much information as possible. So I'm going to put the red, maybe I'll do it like this. I'm going to put the red full strength, so you can see it's a lot of pigment and not very much water, because I want to see the darkest possible variation of my color. That's a little too dry. So I can see what the color will give me from the darkest I can get the color on, which is full strength. And because I have that masking fluid on here, I can just paint up to that, and then later when I rub it off I'll have some decent straight edges. And now I'm painting with the full strength over the black, and now I want to start introducing a little bit of water to, I'll put some water over here, to my paint, dip my tip in here, and then start a little bit away from it. Of course I don't want to run back, and then I can go back into it. So I'm trying to get it lighter as I go. Back on the water control station, I added a little bit more water to it and run it together. And a little bit more water, dab dab. And so I'm getting more and more water into my pigment so I can kind of see the full range of this color. Now I'm going to rinse out my brush, not completely, but pretty well. That was pretty well. So let's see if I can catch this before it dries on me, and just try to get the lightest possible wash as I'm moving out towards the edge. So I can see what this color, which is Quinacrodone red, what it looks like, full strength in here. And then as I start introducing water, so it gets lighter and lighter and lighter, that gives me the full range of the color. And that's what I'm going to do with all my colors. And on this one here, I can just continue just to show you one more. So I have gotten on my palette Quinacrodone red, permanent rose, opera rose, magenta, and then so now I'm over in the French Ultramarine blue. And I want to make sure that my brush is clean. So here's some clean water. And now I'm going to get full strength of the French Ultramarine blue on this one here. And again, I can do the same thing that I did on the Quinacrodone red I showed you on the other piece of paper. Put a little bit of water in that last part of the stripe I'm going to paint. That way, that way I can make sure that I get it like really watery once I get out there. And then here, let's move over a little bit so you can see. Here's French Ultramarine Blue, full strength. Go over the black, feeling that I could even get a little bit more pigment on. Make sure it's full strength, as dark as I can get it. And go over here, the black. And then as soon as I'm over the black, I want to start getting some of the pigment off and start getting a little bit more water in the paint. And so I usually start a little bit away so that I have time to deposit some of all that water so it doesn't rush back in and mess up the full strength. Then get them together, get some of that pigment off, drag it out a little bit further. And you want to get all this done while it's wet to get that nice. And see, now I'm hitting that water that I deposited, so that's going to come in handy now that I want to get it a lot lighter. I need to rinse it out now. Dab, dab. Clean water, dab, dab. And then let's see. A little bit more pigment on. Try and see. It doesn't run back on me. There. Super light. A little bit more pigment in here. Just so I get that a little bit smoother. I mean, it's, you know, it's just to put on it, my palette, but still, since I have to look at it every day, I want it to look as nice as possible and be as accurate in the sense of how the colors will give me a range from this dark to this light. I think this is good enough. It's not perfect, but I always like to say perfection is highly overrated anyway. But there is the blue one, and try and lift out a little bit more. It's a little bit of a harsh, transition there. I think that's a little bit better. There. There we get to the lightest light. That's a little bit better. Alright, so I do all my colors like that. And then when that's done, I will make sure that everything is dry. And then I'm going to lift out. And I'll show you that in my next step. Alright, so as you can see, I'm down to the last color, which is my burnt sienna. Put a little bit of water in the end here, where I want it really diluted. And then I'm going to mix full strength burnt sienna on my palette out here. Make sure that I get it really thick as I can paint it on, as dark as I can paint it on. And then I'm going to start here. Yeah, that's not dark enough. I can see that too much water in it, so I need to go back and get thicker pigment. There, I think that's going to be better. Let's try it out. It's better, yeah. And so I like to go with my thickest possible concentrated burnt sienna, in this case, over my black line that I did with a permanent marker, so that I can see how transparent and or how opaque my colors are. It's going to come in handy later on when I'm choosing my colors. You know, sometimes if you know that you are going to be lifting, start out here with a little bit of a thinner coat, you're going to be lifting your colors later for some highlights maybe or something like that, then if you can choose a color that is not staining, then that would be a good way to go. Just getting some of the pigment out now that I'm trying to get thinner. And these guides can just tell you a whole lot about what the colors will give you, from how dark it will go to how it looks when it's really diluted. So it's very helpful. I'm gonna rinse my brush out and try and see if I can just lift out just a little bit more so I get really light there. I think that's as good as it can get. And now I just have to wait for the whole thing to dry. And then I'm going to show you how I lift out a strip from each color here in the full strength section, because that's where I can find out if they're staining or non-staining, depending on how well they lift out. So I'm going to have to let it dry completely before I do that. So I'll be back in a little bit, and then we'll do that little test. Okay, I finished painting my guide over the black line that I made with a permanent marker, and now I need to take the masking off. But before I do that, I just wanted to show you that if you don't have a masking stick, you can totally use masking tape instead, or you could just do it freehand, but I'm just kind of a little picky because I want my guide to look nice. So you can also take just some regular blue tape from the hardware store and put that on. So put one piece down there and put another piece down here, and then I can paint. Oops, I should do it all the way out to the edge here if I want to make it neat, like here. Paint my stripe of watercolor here, you know, full strength over the black mark, and then start watering it down so that I get like the range of the color. So that's another option. The only bad thing about that is, you know, want to make sure that you press down really well so the paint don't creep under, and then take the tape off carefully right after you painted it, so it doesn't give the paint any chance to run under if it would want to do that. And then you can go down. You have to probably skip one, because you know you can't put the tape over the stripe that you've just painted. You can't put another piece of tape over there, so you have to give yourself a little time. You can, you know, skip. Shouldn't be too hard. Alright, so I put 2 pieces of tape down over the area where I have the full strength of the colors, and I'm going to use a flat brush with kind of short hairs. It's a watercolor brush, but it has kind of flat hairs, and so it's a little, you know, has a good spring, and so it's a little stiff, and that works well to try this lifting of colors, because I don't want to use a scrubber brush. It's not for me about getting back to the white of the paper, it's for me to see how easily the colors lift or how much they stain. That's the information I'm after. So a damp brush, clean damp brush, and then here's my Quinacrodone red, and I'm going to give it one good scrub. Then I have Kleenex, clean, dab it out, rinse my brush, make sure it's clean, and then damp, give it a second scrub, and dab it out, clean tissue, rinse my brush again, and give it a third scrub. I give each of the color strips the same treatment, so 3 scrubs with dabbing in between, and that way I can compare, and that way I've done the same through all of the colors. And you can see here, this is as much as I got lifted out of the Quinacrodone red, so pretty okay, but still some color left. Let me show you the permanent rose, and you can already kind of get an inkling from the name. Anytime one of the colors have the name permanent or the word permanent in the name, you can be pretty sure that that's a staining color. And that was scrub number 1. Let's get scrub number 2 on the permanent rose. Dab that out. and scrub number 3. So there we go, and you can see definitely quite a lot of color left. So that's the staining color. So let's go down to the Opera Rose and see how that one is. Same thing, scrub number 1. Dab it out. Clean my brush. Scrub number 2. Rinse out my brush. Clean water, damp brush, scrub number 3. And you can see that one lifted out much better than the 2 previous reds. Can you tell? Alright, and then we come down to our permanent magenta. Permanent magenta. So already the name indicates a staining color. And scrub number 2. There we are. And scrub number 3. Actually did pretty well. It's not bad for such a dark color. And now we come to our blues. The first blue we have on our palette. I want to switch water. It's getting a little mucky. French Ultramarine blue. Let's give that a little scrub. And scrub number 1. Now we go to scrub number 2. And scrub number 3. And look at that. Definitely not a staining color. Can you see how I got that all lifted out? Almost all of it. The next color is our cobalt blue. It's a lighter blue. It's a wonderful blue. The only reason I don't have that as my first blue on my palette, or only blue on my palette, is that it's so light it won't give you darks. So now we scrub number 2. I barely got anything left to scrub on this thing. Dab that out. Yeah. So for good measure I'll do scrub number 3, but there's basically nothing to scrub. It's gone. Look at that. Cobalt blue. You can lift out basically back to the white of the paper. And that's one of the reasons it's such a wonderful color to work with for a lot of different things. I'm going to go down to then my Antwerp blue, which is down here. And scrub number 1. Scrub number 2. And scrub number 3. And you can see I do not get all the way back to the white of the paper so that it stains. And I'm going to do the rest of the colors off camera and then we're going to talk about it. The other sample I used to show you the scrub out, I have substituted the Quinacrodone Gold with green gold from Daniel Smith. Of course, sometimes I like to work with that instead, and I don't use Quinacrodone Gold that often, but it is a beautiful color. This was scrub number 3, and you can see it's a quinacridone, just like the Quinacrodone Red. They do stain. And then the last color I have on here is my burnt sienna. It's an earth tone, and that's the one I love to use together with the cobalt blue or the French ultramarine blue for a lot of different things. Anything natural, you know, like wood, rocks, trunks, bark, that kind of stuff. And scrub number 2 here. And we have one more scrub, scrub number 3. Here we have that. Okay, so you can see burnt sienna is also pretty forgiving, lifts out very well. So there is our guide on what the colors will do if you try to scrub them out. Alright, so here is my guide where I have substituted the Quinacrodone Gold, this one, with green gold from Daniel Smith instead. So that's actually a green, and I don't normally have greens on my palette, but this particular green, I love it because it's more yellow than, say, sap green or some of the other greens that are popular with a lot of painters. Scrub number 1. And it's very pushy, and I'll show you that in a demo later, in a demo that I have planned. Show you why I'm kind of in love with the green gold, even though normally I tell my students don't have green on your palette, because I want them to be able to create their own greens. Otherwise I find paintings get very, very static if people just use a green out of a tube, and later on in their painting life they seem to have a lot of trouble with greens then. Whereas, you know, if you were used to from the beginning to create your own greens from yellows and blues, I think you'll fare much better. So we can definitely see green gold is also a staining color, just like the Quinacrodone Gold was. And then we should take off, and be careful when you do this, take off the masking tape gently, and that way you get a good, good guide on how much you can lift up the various colors you have on your palette. Again, gently, gently. And so I didn't really get to the explaining of the black line we put down. It's going to be a little hard to see probably on the camera, but you will see it on your own samples. So here we can see how well the colors lift out. So we can see a lot of them are staining, some of them like the Opera Rose is not very staining. French Ultramarine Blue, Cobalt Blue, and I would say the Burnt Sienna, they lift out very well, very well. And then we're painted over the black line, so we can see that a color like Opera Rose is definitely more opaque than both the Quinacrodone Gold, Quinacrodone Red and the Permanent Rose. You can see they did not obscure the black nearly as much as the Opera did. So that's why I put the black stripe on first of the permanent marker and then paint over it, because it'll show me how opaque the colors are. And we can see both Cobalt and French Ultramarine Blue, they have they're semi-transparent. And then our Indigo is such a strong color. I mean, it completely, but it's also so dark, it completely obliterates our black line. And the transparent yellow, Quinacrodone Gold, and also the Burnt Sienna, they just give just a little tiny veil over, but not much, so they're basically pretty transparent. And I also find that the Burnt Sienna from Winsor Newton seems more transparent than some of the other burnt siennas. I mean, it's considered semi-transparent, and I can see a little film. But anyway, that's your guide. And then, last but not least, we need to grab one of our micron pens or another permanent marker, and then of course you need to write the name of your colors on here. So I always write them here in the lighter part so that I can read it. And Quinacrodone Red, I just write Quin Red, Permanent Rose, etc. So I'm just going to do that. And then you have a fabulous guide to put on your your palette. So I, put it on, line it up, and then if you want to make it really so it looks nice, take some white artist tape or masking tape and tape it on all 4 sides, and then, write your name on here, and then, you have a fabulous guide for your palette, and it's a tool for you. So it's really worth spending the time, I find. And by putting down the stripes of the colors from full strength to as light as you can get it, and then lifting out, painting over the black stripe. I mean, man, there's a lot of information. So you're already familiarizing yourself with your colors. So especially if you're a beginner, this is just, it's not a waste of time, and it comes in handy later. It's not just like a little exercise for the sake of an exercise. It's a tool for you that you'll be happy that you have. So with that, I'm going to leave you and wish you happy painting, and I'll be back with another video.